Wander Wealthy Podcast, episode 234. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Wander Wealthy Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here today. And if you're brand new, if you just stumbled upon this show, hello to you. My name is Tess Wicks. I am the host of this show, as you can probably tell. I'm the founder of Wander Wealthy, and I'm a money coach and money nerd to the core turned business coach. And I am here to help any of the new, aspiring, and seasoned money coaches of the world make money online, help their clients thrive, and realize that it's possible to build a financial coaching business, a money coaching business, a wealth coaching, whatever you want to call it. It's possible. We're here to help you. We're here to support you in learning how to not only create your life-changing coaching program, but also how to market and sell and deliver that program to your clients. And that's what we're all about here. So, warm welcome to you. Thank you for being here. Today, I am really excited about this week's episode. We're going to go into a little bit of the how to be a coach nitty-gritty, and I'm going to share with you how I personally prepare for my financial coaching sessions. I want to give you kind of a little bit of the step-by-step and also share with you how I've definitely shifted my preparation tactics since I first started my business. But before we dive in, of course, I am here to introduce you to this week's podcast sponsor, which is no less the Wealthy Coach Blueprint. That is my 12-week business coaching program for new, aspiring, and current money coaches who are looking to make their own and create their own life-changing coaching program, learn how to build their platform and their business online using social media marketing, and how to sell, how to price themselves, and how to deliver that life-changing coaching program. So everything you kind of get in the podcast, but jam-packed in a really intensive but loving and caring and supportive 3 months where we work one-on-one with each other. And we are gearing up for one-on-one slots opening up in just a couple of weeks. Starting the first full week of September, some spots are going to be open, only 7. And I'm excited because it's going to be one-to-one, you and me. We are going to make your business happen or restructure your business and refine your niche if that's what you need. Wherever you're at in your money coaching business, I will meet you there, and then we will make a game plan for how we're going to carry it forward using the blueprint as our guide. So if you're curious about the blueprint, head to wanderwealthy.com/apply. You can check out all the details of the blueprint, and then you can put your name on the wait list. So scroll all the way to the bottom. If you don't even need to read anything, which, I do buy sometimes in that way. Like I just catch someone's vibe and I'm like, I want what they're dishing out. Let me just jump on the wait list so that they can let me know when we can work together. So if that's your vibe, scroll all the way to the bottom, hit the button at the bottom, put your name and email address, and get signed up for the wait list because it is first come, first serve. And I want to know who is ready, who is raising their hands. If you want to take it an extra step, go ahead and reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is at Tess_Wicks. That's TESS_WICKS. I want to hear from you. So send me a message. It's not weird or creepy for me. I mean, I get messages every day. So if that's a little weird on your end, know that this is my job. This is what I do. So reach out. I want to chat with you. I promise it's going to be cool. So wanderwealthy.com/apply. Spots are going to be opening up real soon, and you are going to want to know when you can snatch a strategy session with me, and we can make sure that the blueprint is the best next step for you and your business. All right, that's that. Let's jump over to today's podcast topic because I just have so much to share with you in terms of how I prepare. Let's start here. I used to spend hours upon hours upon hours preparing for my financial coaching calls. And I think a big reason that happened, and I guess the reason I think that that's not a good tactic. Like, I do think preparation is super important, which is why I'm making this podcast episode. But I think a reason why that's not always a good tactic is because then you sit down and you realize, like, okay, you're charging your clients, and a lot of people think, oh, I'm charging my clients by the session, and then they forget that there's preparation that goes into it. There's all of the experience and the self-study that you have to do on your end. There's all of the other things you might want to add. And so when you after the fact, after you've signed a client, after you've quoted them how much it's going to be, and after maybe you've made one of the big mistakes that we make in pricing, which is pricing by the session, you realize, oh, there's a lot more time involved in coaching. And one of the things that can really kind of blow up and out of our control is that preparation. So I do think it's important to pay attention to, and I also think oftentimes we can catch ourselves like spending way too much time preparing. So on one hand, consider the fact that preparation is key. Preparation is a part of it. And you need to remember that when you're pricing your coaching packages. And I would suggest pricing by the package versus the session, because again, there's a lot of time in between coaching sessions where you're going to be doing work for the client. But on the other hand, it's important to also manage your time so that you don't end up working for like less than $2 an hour because you spend so much time in that preparation phase. Now, I think we all can find ourselves over preparing, and I guess that's what I would call it, is over preparing. I think we can all find ourselves doing that because of a myriad of reasons. I think one reason is, of course, I don't want to call it imposter syndrome because it's kind of like you've already signed the client, but now it's this feeling of I have to know everything and over deliver, and I have to be ready for any possible question that can come up. So let me go ahead and basically get a master's degree in finance in like all these specific financial areas without knowing if those questions are really going to come up, right? So I think that's on one hand, we can get a little bit of that imposter syndrome or feeling like a fraud because we're just like trying to anticipate every single thing that could happen and every single question that could come up. And then we get into this like over preparation mode and we go into kind of like over analysis, over consuming, over education. Now, I think another reason that we might find ourselves in over preparation, other than that kind of feeling that we need to know everything, is along the same lines, but overcommitting ourselves. So oftentimes, and this would happen more so between sessions, not like before your first session, but between sessions, you might agree to do something that is beyond the scope of your either capabilities or even just like the scope of your client agreement and what a coach is really set there to do, or what you specifically want to help your clients with. Now, there's a gray line here, and I think that's the trick with any kind of professional service provider, but especially for coaches, because we feel this, a little bit of that imposter syndrome, a little bit of feeling like a fraud. It's very normal to be like, well, I don't know everything about estate planning or about insurance or about investing. And here's the deal. You don't have to, right? A coach doesn't have to give advice on these things and probably shouldn't. We should reserve that for those people who are, following the regulations and they're doing the designations and the certifications. And like, that's something that you do not have to touch as a coach. But the second you agree to do something that either A, you're not qualified to touch on, which you really, I would not recommend. Be very careful about that. But also B, just something that's out of the scope of what you deliver as a coach, the package that you provide to your clients, or out of the scope of what you're interested in. That's when you get to yourself in a position where then you have to go into over preparation mode because, oh no, I agreed to do something that is outside of my zone of genius, that is outside of my capabilities, that is outside my understanding. Now, again, this is a gray area because of course you want to provide the client with, the answers to some of their questions. Of course, you want to provide them with solutions. Of course, you want to provide them with value as the coach. But you also have to be aware of what is just fully outside of what the initial agreement was. And I think that sometimes we get this belief and this feeling that if I don't do this for my client, they're going to be displeased. They're going to be disappointed. They're going to feel like I'm gypping them out of their money because I'm not answering every question that they've asked. But I think what actually can happen is when you just make sure to reiterate those boundaries, and that's what you set forth in your client agreement. That's what you set forth when you deliver them, the sales page of your program and let them know what's all included. That also draws a line for what's not included, right? That sets these expectations. It sets the boundaries. So once you remind them of that and just let them know, like, this is outside of the scope of what I can offer, I can, refer you to someone who could answer that question, or I can send you some resources that might be helpful, but only agreeing to do something that, on your end is going to take you, no more than 30 minutes, right? Or even 15 minutes, I would say. Being willing to help them see where they could get the answers without you taking hours and hours and hours getting the answer, specifically when it is outside of your comprehension, understanding, capabilities, expertise, zone of genius, all of that good stuff. So those are just like two ways that I see kind of over preparation come up. I've personally experienced it. I've seen clients personally experience it. And I just want to let you know that first and foremost, I think far more than what you might think you know. And oftentimes when we get into over preparation because of imposter syndrome or feeling like a fraud and really wanting to like over deliver on our promises, we sell ourselves short and we really forget what we already intuitively know and how the coaching sessions are really going to evolve. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, remember to respect the boundaries that you put in place when you agree to work with your clients and your clients agree to work with you. And know that it is safe for you to say, that's outside of my scope of work or that's outside of my area of expertise, but I'm willing to help you get the answers that you need. I'm willing to help refer you to someone or send you some resources that could answer your question. But that's going to be, outside of our scope of work. And kind of go from there. If it's something that's within your realm, but you feel like, maybe it's just a little bit of stretch on your understanding, then yeah, you might have to go into preparation. That's where I say, as a coach, you're allowed to get resourceful and go find the answer for your client and then bring it back to them. And that's where, we might have some preparation time of helping our clients get the answers that they need, get them the guidance that they need, get them the resources that they need that are within our kind of zone of area. But it might just be like a stretch on what you were expecting from all of your clients, right? You can only start with what you know and what you can expect and then build and grow yourself from there. So that's where I want to kind of take us now, is like what I personally do for preparation for my money coaching sessions. Because before, I used to spend hours and hours and hours on each of my clients preparing for their sessions. And basically what happened is for every one session, I was probably spending like 3 hours on the preparation. And once I stepped back and really looked at my time and the packages that I was selling, I was realizing, wow, this is not a profitable move for me. Now, it gets better over time because that's just the way things work. You get faster, you get more efficient, you become more profitable. But also there was just a part of me that felt like I needed to spend this time. I needed to put in the hours of preparation to make sure I'm covering all my bases, but also just for like that little, limiting belief, little internal dialogue that was telling me it's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough, when in fact it was enough, when in fact I was just selling myself short and not really believing in what I already knew that I knew. So my first thing is just like, I do my very best not to over prepare. I'm often much better actually off the cuff than I am having prepared a ton and then wanting to fit that all into the delivery. So I realized some things, and it took me a couple of different things to realize to actually cut down on my preparation time. One was a coach saying, I challenge you to only prepare for 15 minutes for your next coaching session, because she realized I was spending so much time on preparation, and she also knew that I knew more than I was giving myself credit for. So she challenged me, which was like, okay, then I just got to make do with the resources I'm going to provide myself, which is going to be 15 minutes instead of 3 hours. Let's see how this goes. And the other thing was that most of the things I was preparing for when I was spending like 3 hours on my preparation for my coaching sessions, we couldn't even get to like half of those items. So everything I was preparing for never really ended up getting delivered, at least in that coming up coaching session, that then it was a lot of time going into it and not much coming out. And what is interesting about that is you might think, oh, well, shouldn't you then somehow get that information to your client? And on one hand, it's like, yes, eventually. But on the other hand, clients, you need to be very careful about the information you're giving them during each session, because there is such thing as too much information all at once, right? Learning about finance, that's a muscle that really needs to be worked, and it needs to be exercised. It needs to be stressed slightly, but if you overstress it, it's just going to like drop everything and going to go into survival mode, because it's like, this is way too much information coming at me. I'm just going to shut down so I can conserve my energy. So you need to realize that too. Like the over preparation we do as coaches can sometimes result in too much for your clients. So you want to make sure that also that like a lot of that preparation you might be doing might be just like you tapping into overachiever mode, right? Trying to prove yourself, especially if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, and recognizing that that's not actually beneficial for your clients. So I do my best to not over prepare, which I know might sound crazy, might sound counterintuitive, but I'm willing to go into the call with kind of my planned things that we're going to speak about, and then let there be space for questions. Let there be space for the questions to come up that I don't know the answer to in that moment. But then, hey, guess what? That's the first thing we're going to address in our next session, or the first thing I'm going to touch on, between our sessions if I need to go and get an answer and then send it in an email or something. Okay. So here's my plan of action as I prepare for my financial coaching calls is 1, don't over prepare. The second thing is to start the day before. So the day before our coaching session, I set aside 1 hour, and I may not need the full hour, but I set aside 1 hour to look over the money stuff of my clients, or to do some research so that I can be prepared for the session. And this is hard to speak on because I definitely prepare differently for like the very first coaching call than I do for the coaching calls in between. So I'm going to kind of start with, if this was the very first coaching call, I do spend a little bit more than 1 hour. It's usually around 2 hours where I'm getting everything it's the onboarding, it's getting everything set up, it's getting their financial dashboard in place, and just making sure that of the information that I have from the client, I'm as ready as possible for our session. Sometimes that doesn't take me a full 2 hours because sometimes the client gets me everything and it's just super easy to input. Sometimes I have to sort through things. And I do some of the heavy lifting initially with my clients when we first start working together. But then moving forward, if this is, a middle session during our coaching package, if it's the second, the third, the fourth, then typically I, set aside an hour the day before our coaching session just to review their financial dashboard, which is something that I offer my clients. I review to see what sort of homework they have accomplished, what they have gotten done. And then I review a lot of our correspondence between the calls. Now, this is just the preparation for the call, but we do oftentimes correspond between the calls. I send them homework and just a reminder of what we discussed. And then here's the game plan moving forward until our next session. I usually send that in an email after the call. So I want to go review that. So I remember, okay, what did we talk about? What was the homework? What have they submitted since, or what have they accomplished since? And then typically it's not just that email, but it's a couple other emails back and forth that we're exchanging. So I'm just kind of getting caught up on, what happened in our last call. This is important for me because I don't talk to my money coaching clients every single week. Some of my money coaches who have their own clients do talk to their clients every single week. And it's a little bit easier to stay on top of what did we talk about? What was the homework? Let's make sure that's all, squared away. But also sometimes you can forget what happens in a week because some weeks there's a lot going on. So it's always really good for me to just kind of review that and make sure that there's nothing kind of no stone left unturned in terms of what we did discuss the previous session and that homework. And if there is, then that day before I'll send out, one last follow-up email just to make sure like, hey, these are some of the things that we still needed to get done. Let's try to get those done before tomorrow, or let's, during our session tomorrow, we will talk about the game plan of getting said thing done. So that's a big thing that I like to do the day before. And it's especially important when it comes to money coaching, because there's just a lot of moving pieces when you're a money coach. There's a lot of moving parts. Did they get the budget in order? Are their accounts set up? Did they submit these materials for me to review? And so you just want to make sure that everything is in order. And if you have something like a financial dashboard, which again is what I provide to my clients, it's like their net worth, their budget, their debt calculator, their retirement calculator, it's kind of a home base for everything, then I need to check and make sure all of those numbers are updated and we have a good starting point for our lesson or session moving forward the next day. So hour before or 1 hour the day before, a lot of times I would say 75% of the time, I'm not spending that full hour on preparation, but I want to make sure I block it out in case there's something that just fell through the cracks. I think that's just my best practice for having that. But like I said, the email correspondence that we do between our sessions usually is, what I'm reviewing, and that could take minutes. That could take, 15 minutes or less. So it's really just having that space in case there is something that I need to provide there. The next thing is 10 to 15 minutes before the session, on the day of the session, on the hour of the session, 10 to 15 minutes before, I always try to have all of my sessions be at least 30 minutes apart. What am I trying to say? There's a 30-minute gap of time, a buffer, if you will, between sessions. So that way, if one goes a little bit long, I at least try to cut it off if it's going over time, cut it off before we go any more than 15 minutes over. That would be definitely aggressive, but it does happen. I am still an over-deliverer, so I still do it sometimes with the client's permission, of course. But then I still have that 15 minutes to kind of get myself set up for the next session for the client, that we're kind of thinking about right now. Is I want to make sure I have 10 to 15 minutes to prepare myself. So in this scenario, right, I'm not necessarily looking back at past correspondence and getting myself up to speed with what we were talking about and where we need to go for this session. But what I'm doing now is I'm updating on, typically my clients will submit accountability and let me know what they've accomplished, what they're committed to accomplishing for the next week, and maybe some things that are getting in the way or some questions that they're asking. So I just want to review that so I am very prepared for what we're specifically talking about during this session. And then again, if I need to, I'll go back and review the notes from our previous sessions or review the questions that were asked between the sessions just to make sure it's all aligned and we, have a game plan of what we're going to talk about. The other thing that I'll do during this time period is I will look at my framework. So my framework is what guides me in my coaching, whether that is business coaching and I'm reviewing the blueprint framework and seeing, okay, what are we going to be talking about specifically today based on where the client is in that framework, in the blueprint, or I'll look at my money coaching framework and I'll think, okay, depending on what session it is, depending on what we talked about in the previous session, there is a plan of action for what we're going to be talking about next. Sometimes they get delivered the education and the training that kind of sets us up to review what they learned in that previous, education, training, whether it's a module or a lesson. And then we can talk about that during that session. But I need to review it just to make sure I know where we're at, what we're talking about, and where they're going next. So again, it doesn't take a lot of time. It's just refreshing my memory for each individual client, because that's what happens when you start having a full roster of clients is you lose track of where every individual client is, and you need a refresher. We're all human. That's how it works, especially if your clients aren't all on the exact same week, and especially when it's one-on-one, even if they quote unquote should be on the same week, depending on when you started, if they all started at the same time. a lot of times the clients are going to kind of take their own pace eventually and find their own rhythm. And typically as a coach, we try to make sure that they're on track to finishing, right? What they started, what they want to accomplish, but still meeting them where they're at and taking it at their pace as well. So again, the 10 to 15 minutes before the session is really just to kind of get your bearings and gather the accountability if that's something that you do with your clients, refresh your memory, that moment before the call, where you were at, what you discussed last time, all the homework that they got done, any correspondence that happened between, and then orient to where you're at in your coaching framework, especially if you have a step-by-step process that you follow, kind of orient, okay, this is where the client's at, this is where they should be, once our session is finished, this is where I need to guide them next. All right, now, this is optional for you entirely, and then also when you do it. But what I like to do is create a calm, quiet, and organized space so that I can show up at my best for the client. So this is something that could be like a pre-session ritual so that you can make sure that you're most centered, you're most open, you're ready to hold that space. You're not kind of bringing your crap into it. You're keeping that aside and you're showing up for your client and you're ready to listen to them, ask them questions, and really serve them to the best of your abilities. And you can do this before the session. I mean, this could take 5 minutes or less. So if you have like 10 to 15 minutes for a review and you also have 5 minutes for your pre-session ritual, then that would be like a 20-minute time block. Again, that 30-minute buffer between sessions is a really good thing to have. So maybe you have a 5-minute pre-session ritual. Something that I do is I actually do this kind of creating a quiet space, breathing, grounding, and centering exercise with my clients in the first 2 to 3 minutes of the call. So we typically jump on, hey, how's it going? What's new? Oh my gosh, fill me in. Awesome. Okay, let's take a second before we really dive into the numbers and let's just take a moment to breathe and ground ourselves. And that is super, super key because it just helps the client feel like they're in a safe space and feel like they are, present. They're able to set aside the other things that are happening in their life and they're ready to kind of focus and, have an open and honest conversation with you, right? Talking about money, that's a personal thing. It's very intimate. And so you want to feel safe and you want to know that like you are present, you, the coach, and your client is present and you can have that open and free and, no judgment conversation. So a pre-session ritual or a in the moment, for you, that might feel a little bit weird to suggest with your clients, especially if you're very analytical. And that used to be weird for me too, because I've always been a very rigid, let's talk about the numbers kind of person. But I really love kind of shattering these expectations that we're just going to talk numbers and be like, hey, let's take a moment to breathe and center ourselves and ground ourselves. And yeah, it's a little woo, but I think it's also just such a good exercise. So I love doing it with my clients, but you absolutely don't have to, because if you show up from a grounded and centered and open and calm space, your clients are also going to feel that. So you can allow that to be present for them as well. All right. The last thing I have to share with this, and we kind of sped through this, but I feel like we're at a good time spot in terms of the podcast length. I just am a talker. I just keep it going. But the last thing I want to share is that you can't plan what's going to come in a session. You can't plan what questions are going to be risen. You can't plan, what your client might have done that they didn't discuss with you, or not that they need to discuss decisions with you, but that they didn't mention to you before. And so now it's like, okay, let's put this fire out, or let's make a new game plan. A lot of times you do have to be willing to change gears and change what's going to get covered in that session in the moment. And so you can't really plan what's going to come up in the session. So the idea of over preparing or over giving is something that you can take the pressure off a little bit, right? You don't need lots of action steps in order to give true value in a coaching session. You don't need to, plan a whole lesson plan for the, if it's going to be an hour that you're spending together or 30 minutes or however long your coaching sessions are. You don't need to fill that whole time on your end, right? Your client is going to come with questions. They're going to come with updates. They're going to come with, you name it. And your job is to listen. Your job is to not overwhelm your clients. Your job is probably to kind of ease the tension and help them see that, okay, it's going to be okay. Let's make a game plan. And your job might be to pivot in the moment all the plans that you had for that session to pivot into, okay, we're going to take this session in a different direction. And that's okay, right? That might give you a little bit of anxiousness right now. You might feel those nervousness, cropping up, especially if you've never done a money coaching session. You might be like, what? How am I supposed to deal with like spontaneity? Right? But remember, like, that's how life goes. And if you've done it for yourself, you can absolutely guide and hold that space and work with your client to manage that situation with them, right? And like, your responsibility as the coach is not to do it for them. It's not to solve their problems. That's their responsibility. Your responsibility is to show them that they have a teammate. They have a third party to knock ideas around with. They have someone to offer guidance and suggestions, but never hard advice, never getting in there and moving the money for them, never, doing it all and saying, okay, well, this came up, but I had my own plan, so we're going to follow my plan, right? Your job as the coach is to move with your clients, and it's a done with process, not a done for them process. So as much as you might, get a little bit anxious, right? I have it for some reason in my throat. Like, I get anxious in my throat. If you might feel a little bit of anxiousness about what you're going to talk about, what you're going to cover in that session, especially if you now know that like life is unpredictable, as are finances. They need to be flexible. And that's also why it's never like okay, we're going to fix your finances and then it's done forever, right? It's a lot of times why people need to continue to have financial coaches, because so much changes in life all the time and unexpected events happen all the time. And it's so helpful to have someone there to navigate that with. So again, you've most likely done that for yourself. And now it's an opportunity for you to bring that sort of guidance and that sort of calmness and that sort of, hey, I've been here and I can help you navigate it too. Or even if you've not been there, hey, I've not been there, but this isn't happening for me, but it's happening for us, and I'm going to help you navigate this. And if that means I have to go get resourceful and come back to you with a game plan in an hour or in a day or in a week or until our next session, that's what's going to happen. And that's what I can commit to. Again, only if it's within your scope and there's not someone better who, should be doing this, right? If it's something that's insurance, estate planning, investing, and it's advice related, then we can keep it for those. Oh, and taxes, like anything that we are aware, there are people who handle those questions and give direct advice for, we can pass that off. But if it's educational around those topics, then absolutely. If it's helping them understand those topics, if it's helping them understand their options, then absolutely, you can guide them through those things. But again, if that's something you don't want to touch, or if that's something you don't feel capable of touching, then that is up to you, especially if it's outside of the bounds of what your coaching agreement is about in the first place. All right, so don't over-prepare. I know that's easier said than done, but challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to say, okay, I've been working with this client for some time. I'm noticing that I'm like way over-preparing, spending a lot of time on preparation. What if I challenge myself to just 30 minutes, right? Start with 30 and then work your way down to those 15-minute pre-session preparation sessions. And again, you can set aside that hour the day before so that if there's numbers that you need to crunch or new trainings you need to create, or, just a lot has happened since the session, so you need a big old review, then that's there for you. But you also have that kind of 10 to 15 minute pre-session quick prep time. And if you just want to limit your preparation time to those time frames, that's also okay. That's what other coaches are doing too. And it gets better with time. I can definitely say that. You're going to feel more and more prepared for every session, the more sessions that you do. But I also, it's Parkinson's law. We use the resources that we provide ourselves. So if you have 3 hours to prepare for a session, and you're most likely going to use it, right? You're going to just keep going and going and going until you feel like it's quote unquote enough, which we know is a word that we can never attain, right? We can never attain enoughness because no one knows what that means. So don't over prepare. Less is more for your clients. less is more for your preparation. Just do it smartly. That's probably not a word, but we're going to make it a word for the sake of this podcast episode, and keep it efficient and effective. Okay? You got this. I'm super excited for your new challenge of quick, effective, and efficient preparation, and see how that changes what happens in your sessions. See how that changes the way that you show up, and see how much space it creates for your clients to actually ask questions, to actually work through some problems or some questions that they have, some scenarios they might be struggling with, and giving them that space instead of just kind of like over delivering and over action planning and overwhelming. Okay? So that's your challenge. That's how I prepare for my money coaching sessions nowadays and all my other coaching sessions. I focus on less is more, and it's amazing. So that's the podcast episode for today. I would be making a grave mistake if I didn't let you know that you can also download my step-by-step guide to successful money coaching sessions. So now that you know how to prepare, what about actually doing the session? What about actually like knowing what you're going to talk about, where you're going to take the client in that conversation? What about creating that space? Wouldn't you like to know how we do that? Well, you can grab my step-by-step guide for free by heading to wanderwealthy.com/guide, as easy as that. And you're going to get my kind of outline, my step-by-step outline of how I conduct not only my very first coaching session with a client, but also those middle point sessions. I don't ever know what to call them. And then the final coaching session, and see some of my exclusive tips and tricks for, how I get clients to open up, how I get clients to kind of continue to work with me, how I give them options for us to continue our relationship together, and so much more. So wanderwealthy.com/guide. Do not forget, this is your second to last chance to join the waitlist for the Wealthy Coach Blueprint before we open for enrollment. And remember, it is first come, first serve. And if you're ready for some one-on-one support this fall to build or refine your money coaching business so that it can be in a much better place at the end of this year than where you started, or where maybe you found yourself midpoint through the year, then head to wanderwealthy.com/apply. The waitlist is waiting for you right there. You can check out all the details. If you have questions for me, send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Tess_Wicks. And there's so much other good stuff that you can get your hands on if you head to wanderwealthy.com. So don't forget to check it out. We have the pricing formula. We have a special sales masterclass that is yours only if you do sign up for the pricing formula. So go hit that up. And we have the client attraction content matrix. If you're hitting a rut, if you're hitting a dead space or hitting a wall when it comes to creating content and making sure that it aligns and connects with your ideal client. So lots available for you over at wanderwealthy.com. If you have questions, again, I'm at Tess_Wicks on Instagram, and I cannot wait for what this fall has to bring. I hope you're having an amazing end to your summer. And until next time, I hope you wander wealthy.